implementation of high-quality educational programs for students with disabilities. Just to kick us off, we would like to have you put in the chat your name, your role, and what does coaching look like in your local context? If you have coaching, do you have coaching for special educators and their development of IEPs and implementation? If you don't, you can share that as well. But we want to know who's in the room and how you are engaging with coaching currently at your local district. So as you're putting that in the chat today, I would like to share our session objectives. We want you to gain some knowledge around effective coaching techniques that support educators in the development of their IEPs, development and implementation of their IEPs. We want you to understand how to use some of our resources through Progress Center, the National Center for Systemic Improvement, to build a coaching institute that helps support the application of IEP principles. And the last part of ours is we want to give you an opportunity to hear lessons learned and tips from local educators in the field who have implemented a coaching institute and how to maximize the impact it has on local educators in the development and implementation of their IEPs. So again, thank you for joining us. And I'm just going to take a minute as the Progress Center staff to share how we started off gaining the idea of a coaching institute. Thank you for those of you participating in the chat and sharing your name, your role, and what coaching currently looks like in your local context. I appreciate your engagement. We talk about effective coaching, and the idea of coaching institutes for Progress Center came out of the need from our partnership sites. We have 8 partnership sites in our last year in our grant cycle. And we've had more than 8 sites, but that's currently where we sit with our sites. And we had a lot of discussion with local educators, our partnership sites, about capacity. And as the turnover in staff has been so great in the field of special education, we were getting lots of requests from new administrators, state directors, support specialists around asking about how to build their capacity, how to build their confidence, how to know what to do to engage with their staff, how to develop their staff skills successfully. And we really noticed that there was a gap in capacity in the field as a whole. And we wanted to start offering and developing an institute that would allow educators who have experience with IDEA, who understand the requirements of IDEA, build their capacity to build others' confidence around IEP development and implementation. And that is what birthed our coaching institute within our partnership sites. And so in those coaching institutes, what we found is a really large need to look at the differences between coaching and training. Many people do a lot of training with their staff, but don't feel like they get any real results. They don't see their teachers taking that knowledge and skill and applying it in the field. So as we went further, we recognized that there was a need for these experienced educators to understand the difference between training, consulting, and coaching. And so we built a matrix to help people understand that all 3 pieces of this are the continuum of support for educators. And as you saw Dr. Bailey talk about our ecosystem and Amy Peterson this morning, talking about our ecosystem and the elements that support educators in implementing high quality IEPs, this continuum is part of that. We know we have to train educators and training, as you can see on our matrix here, is really about disseminating important information. It builds knowledge and skills, but we know it has limited impact on outcome change. That we often see that they don't implement those skills and knowledge that they've gained without additional support. We all know as experienced educators that the one and done professional development has little to no effect on changing practices. Then we looked at, on the far right of our matrix here, we can look at the consulting line, where a lot of people that are supporting schools and educators in the schools do a lot of consulting work, where they provide guidance. They provide solutions to problems that are arising within the schools. And we see that that's a valuable tool, but we also know that it has its challenges because staff become dependent on someone else telling them how to solve a problem, how to work through a stickier situation with a family or other staff members. And they don't necessarily acquire the skills necessary to know how to solve that problem without support. So we really then started thinking about, how do we coach within special education? And we found that there's a lot of people that don't coach, and that they're so overwhelmed with consulting and training that they don't get to the heart of coaching. And what we know about coaching is that it has a great impact on changing practices by utilizing the skills and knowledge they learn in training, but applying those within the day-to-day work that they're doing. It has high impact on outcome change, and it's focused on relationship building, and it builds confidence of the educator, not just the one receiving the coaching, but also the coaching institute builds a confidence of the district or local coach that is being developed. One of the barriers or challenges to this is that coaching skills have to be developed. Not everybody has natural coaching skills. And we need to work through giving them the skill sets necessary to go out and coach. It's also very time intensive to learn to coach and spend the time with educators. But we have found that when that time is spent up front, that we spend less time having to consult and train, and we're able to put that time into the coaching. So we think about, well, how does that coaching align with the IDA requirements? We find that many districts are very focused on the procedural piece. We want to provide templates for the IEP. We tell them how to write their present level of performance. We give them a template for measurable annual goals. But what we don't focus on is, if we build a good quality IEP, are we able to implement a program based on that IEP that truly changes the outcome for the student? And in the Coaching Institute, we really wanted to shift the thoughts around just being procedural, because a lot of the people that we worked with through our Coaching Institute were responsible for compliance. And we wanted them to know that just because you're responsible for compliance work doesn't mean that you can't be pushing people to think about implementation. And what does that look like? So how did we do this? We used a series of resources through the Progress Center and the National Center for the National Center for Systemic Improvement. And we want to spotlight some of those resources. Riley is going to share links to each one of these resources in the chat as I go through them very quickly. And then after, we're going to bring on a panel of local educators who participated in the development of a coaching institute in their local district. And we're going to ask them about their experience with implementing a coaching institute and the impact it has had in their local context. So let's highlight these resources. Our first resource that we start off with is the first half day we spend really understanding, what is coaching? What does coaching mean, and how is it different than what I'm currently doing, or is it similar to what I'm currently doing? We use this activity, this article that is written through the National Center for Systemic Improvement around what is coaching. We jigsaw this. We help everybody build a foundation so that we have a common language and vocabulary around coaching. And there are different types of coaching. There is coaching for changing teacher practices. There is systems coaching, and we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And this really highlights the process of that. We use another infographic through NCSI that is a 2-pager. It's a quick piece of paper that coaches can take with them that give you the example of the coaching cycle, which is observe, model, and provide feedback while you're building a relationship or already have a relationship. And we talk about, how do we build those relationships with those staff that we struggle with through this activity. We then move into teaching our coaches how to provide the feedback in that coaching cycle. And what we're finding, this is one of our most powerful resources, is that many people are not confident in providing critical feedback. And we give them opportunities in the Coaching Institute to work with other staff to provide feedback about what they're doing. They will use IEPs, they will read someone's IEP, and then they have to provide feedback to another coach that's being trained. And they often hear that how they're phrasing things is not coming across the way they intended. And it helps them really think about the words that they're using, how to be more supportive in their language. And many people have not had an opportunity to really learn how to give feedback for coaching purposes. We then talk about if we're coaching new teachers, young teachers, teachers that are coming into our school system that are not familiar with our local IEP document. And we use this Progress Center activity called Getting to Know Your IEP. The caveat to this activity is that it's not judging whether you have a good IEP, if your state has a good IEP. It's saying, where are the required IDEA elements in my local IEP? It is a blank IEP. We have a facilitator and a participant guide. Riley is sharing the links to the site that has all of the materials, not just the facilitator guide that's on the screen. So if you're interested in this really helps you break down that. And when we get to the panel discussion, this actually was built out of one of our partnership sites due to some teachers struggling with understanding their local document. And this really helps teachers think about if, for example, in my home state of Montana, the present level is broke up multiple places, and people don't understand that it's one present level statement altogether. And this activity helps them conceptualize that through their local document. We then have a series of tip sheets. Many of you saw them yesterday in some of the training sessions that you were in. And this is a facilitator guide. It also has a participant guide about analyzing our tip sheets. How do we use the tip sheets more effectively to teach the skills that we're looking for and make it interactive and not just a piece of paper that says, here, this is what a present level is. This is what the measurable annual goal is. It really walks you through how do we analyze the tip sheets so that we can gain information and growth from that. And in the Coaching Institute, we teach them how to utilize this as a facilitator of the activity so that they can then use this when a teacher is struggling or an educator is struggling with a piece or a portion of the IEP and make it a positive interaction and something that's engaging and not just passing information on. We also, if many of you have seen this slide before, if you attended anything yesterday, but we also have to talk about the internal consistency, connecting all the parts of the IEP and how critical that is in the process. And so when we look at this, we talk about how all of our parts are connected. Many educators that we're finding are really struggling with seeing the connection, and our coaches that we were developing were struggling to help articulate to their local educators that if you don't have a solid present level of performance statement, that you may struggle to then know what services a student needs, and that there's a disconnect in the IEP, and that sometimes a goal would show up and they're reading it as a coach thinking, why is that goal within this IEP? It doesn't talk about that in the present level. We don't even talk about services around this goal. How is that goal going to be met? And there's a disconnect. So there's an activity that we use called Making Connections that allows people to walk through an IEP and look at the present level, what needs there are, look for the connections to services and goals within that IEP, and determine if it is highly connected or if they need to work on making a better foundation through their present level to connect more to the services and goals. The one caveat to this activity, and you'll hear this in our panel for coming up, is that we encourage you not to use a IEP familiar with this coaches or this teachers that you're using this activity with. We have found that there's a lot of emotion in that activity or in the IEP development. And when they use their own, they get very stuck in the present levels, and it's hard for them to look at the big picture of the activity, which is finding the connections and the critical piece of that. So we have some scenarios at Progress Center, but I will ask my panelists to share the importance of using local documents and how they have used local documents in this activity to impact the field. The last activity that I'm going to share about today is the stories from the classroom. And you saw at the opening session, the one around high expectations with Billy Pickens. This is another one that which is shared often around belonging. Sue Lynn was actually a panelist last year in promoting progress or prepping for progress. And we have a series of stories from the classroom that help people understand and articulate what students with disabilities are experiencing, what teachers who are teaching the students are experiencing. And we have discussion guides and questions that can help a coach break down the barrier of understanding when they have an educator or a teacher, gen ed teacher, whoever it is, that's struggling to make a connection to those reasons why we're doing what we're doing for students with disabilities. These are proactive activities that help them self-recognize without the coach having to come in and saying, you're part of the problem, we're struggling, this student is struggling because of something that's happening within your classroom. These activities help promote discussion and conversation around that. So we have many other activities within the Coaching Institute to develop their skills, but what all of these activities that I just highlighted are activities that are turnkey, that they can take back to their local educators and use as coaches to facilitate these discussions and develop those skills and knowledge that this teacher needs to be able to develop and implement high quality educational programs. So we're going to move for the last portion of our session to the panel discussion, because I want you to hear from local educators who have gone through the process of a coaching institute and helping the Progress Center develop a coaching institute, and how it has impacted both positively and challenges that they've experienced in the implementation of a coaching institute, and how you as a local educator could implement something similar moving forward. So here are the 5 sites that we did coaching institutes. I have 2 here today. I have East Baton Rouge and I have New York City Public Schools here. But we also did coaching institutes in Guam and the Commonwealth of North Mariana Islands and the Nevada Charter Schools Network. All of them helped us refine this process and helped us think about what do local educators need, and I'm very excited. Before I ask them to join us and introduce them, I just want to share a couple lessons learned because I think it's important for you to conceptualize as we move forward in this discussion with our panel. What was the Institute like? How was it set up? So we recommend 3 full days of interactive sessions. It's a lot of time to dedicate to this, but what we have found is that when there are 3 full days dedicated, there's more robust conversations that's happening with the coaches. They get more time to practice the skills. We have had ones that were all 3 days in a row. We had some that were 2, and then we came back for 1. We also did have we definitely had success with moving it into 2 days. There's just less opportunity for discussion and conversation. And so you might have to think about your local audience and how much discussion they need to build their skills around coaching. We recommend that it is a face-to-face type of training, although it can be done virtually and it can be successful. The feedback we got overwhelmingly from those that participated is that the face-to-face allowed them to interact with each other in ways that were harder online, and it made it more authentic with how they may turn and coach in their local district. The audience for this coaching institute is critical. We want you to be thinking of district and state staff that have previous knowledge to IDA. This coaching institute was not designed for brand new educators. It was meant to be the staff that's going to be working to develop your local educators. And that could be administrators, it could be teachers, it could be district coaches. And we put some example terms that you might use. It might even be a series of lead teachers that have experience. To achieve full benefit, I think it's critical to point out that all of our coaching institutes had the staff that was being trained had some sort of initial interaction with the Progress Center training material. So if you have not had that in your local context, we highly recommend that the coaching staff go on and complete our short online modules around present levels and annual goals and all the development of the IEP modules, because we know it takes up to 7 iterations of hearing something before someone can take action as an adult. And so this helps increase the amount of time they're hearing the information, which allows the coach to not have the barrier of understanding the information, but really then thinking, how do I apply that information with local educators? And then we want to recommend that it is important to have some sort of follow-up discussion for participants to talk about how their coaching cycles went, to build the continual skills, to allow them to have a place say, I'm stuck and I'm struggling with this teacher. What would be something I could do to work further with this teacher? That is something to help build that or to achieve that full benefit. So now I'm going to turn to our panelists. We have Melissa Mancuso, who's the Executive Director of Specialized Instruction in New York City Schools. We have Shara Eisen Grinberg, Senior Director of Specialized Instruction, Quality IEPs, and Professional Learning in New York City Schools. And we have Pamela White, who is the Exceptional Student Service Instructional Support Specialist. Sorry, that is a mouthful. At East Baton Rouge Parish School System. I want to welcome them. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and allow them to come on camera with me. And now we're going to ask them to answer some questions around the local context. And I just want to start off with asking Melissa, could you share how your local district selected participants for the Coaching Institute? And what was your guys' rationale about the audience that you selected to come to this coaching training?
Thank you. So in New York City, we have around 1,800 schools supervised by 45 superintendents, and some of them are organized geographically with schools that are near each other. Some of them are organized, for example, some of the high schools are organized by region, or we have groups of specialized schools. So in those 45 superintendents' offices, there are staff who have roles specific to supporting special education in the schools overseen by that superintendency. So there are titles like Administrator of Special Education, Specialized Student Support Leads, and these individuals are tasked with supporting through training, through consultation, through coaching, IEP development and implementation, special education compliance and instruction. And in addition to those folks, we have some regional, maybe by New York City Borough or in our central office, some additional roles like the Committee of Special Education chairpersons and administrators, post-secondary transition specialists. And so all told, we have about 100 to 200 staff members who are not school-based, but who support the schools. They support the teachers, they support the administrators, they support the clinicians, who they don't, the folks in this group do not work directly with students. They support the schools in special education topics. And so in New York City, we have a monthly event for those individuals to share materials and information with them, to work collaboratively, to build their capacity and support them in the work that they do with the schools. And it was through that venue that we brought the Coaching Institute and invited Progress Center. So we set aside 2 full days in person with this audience to bring the Coaching Institute. And the reason that we selected those individuals is because that's their role already. They already have a responsibility for training, for consulting, and for coaching in these topics. And so when we were using an activity like looking for connections activity with if you've used it or if you've seen it, you have a sample that Sarah was describing earlier, and you highlight alignment throughout the sample. So this is very similar to activities that were used years ago in our city, but the advantage of the Progress Center materials is that this now is a clear protocol, with samples that are created. We like to support our folks with high quality materials. It's one of the reasons we have that monthly event. And so the materials developed by Progress Center have a clear protocol. The samples highlight certain things done well, certain things that need work, just like a real IP. And because those samples don't belong to anyone around that table, it really depersonalizes the experience of looking at the content. And then what we did in New York, because for some of our audience members, the fact that the sample doesn't look like our local IEP template looks, for some folks, that was a focal point. And so we also had local samples available to use for this activity that have been created in our city, so that the way that the sample looks was less of a focal point. But for many of our audience members, the activities that are developed are really high quality, and the focus did stay on the intent of the activity, and really can serve as a grab and go. Can serve as a grab and go activity to then bring when they're working with schools, to bring attention to the connections and the alignment within an IEP.
Awesome. And Pam, I just want you to quickly share, because from East Baton Rouge, your audience was a little different. So New York City schools had a lot of administrators. They have more layers. It's it's the largest district in the nation. So it's doable in a very, very large area. But your district is still good size, but different. And so can you just share the audience and why you selected the current group that you had working in the Coaching Institute?
Yes, Sarah, thank you. So our district in East Baton Rouge Parish, we are the second largest district in our state. And we have over 80 schools. I believe we're at about 86 schools now. So in supporting our students with disabilities in our district, our special education department employs instructional support specialists. And there are over 20 instructional support specialists, and those schools are dispersed among those individuals. They handle providing instructional support, of course, with instruction, IEP compliance, and any other levels of support that are needed at the school level. So quite often, they are tasked with receiving information, or sitting through professional developments, and then carrying that information back into the schools and redelivering that information to the teachers and training our teachers, administrators, and other school level staff. So it only made sense, of course, for our instructional support specialists to be the first group to participate in the Coaching Institute. So that information was delivered to the instructional support specialist, who then utilized that information to coach teachers within their school. And our plan moving forward is for the lead teachers at those school sites to be instructed on coaching, how to effectively implement coaching, so that those teachers can coach. And then we hopefully can see a triple effect from there.
Awesome. Thank you. Shira, I want to start off with you, and I just want to share with the audience one or two positive impacts that you saw your staff experience through the Coaching Institute and you experienced within your districts, and also share a challenge from the Institute that you would want to make people aware of, so that as they're planning their own institute, what challenge should they be aware of and think about as they're getting ready to implement a Coaching Institute?
Hi, everyone. Good to see you today. So I think some positive impacts that we had with the Coaching Institute was it was really good to be able to provide tangible activities that could be turnkeyed easily. With the activities like the tip sheets and the guide for how to analyze them, it really gave us common language that, as Melissa said, we have a few layers before we get information to teachers, that we could put the information out and each layer could really use that same protocol. So it was great for getting information out. I think one thing that was difficult and how we then worked to ameliorate it is making sure to really also know the local context and working together with the Progress Center in co-presenting some things. So if a federal document looks one way, but in our local document, it's different, being clear about like, we're meeting the federal requirements, it might just look a little bit different. I think the other big thing that was a challenge and then we worked on is we work with a population in our coaching institutes of very experienced leaders. So with that, when you're giving out new information, it's easy for us to feel defensive. Like, I know that already. Why are you telling me this again? But working on respecting the knowledge in the room and making sure that we're going into it with, we know there are some misconceptions and there are misconceptions among teachers. So we want to address this because we need to push the implementation of IEPs. And once we were able to try out the activities, you could feel like the walls started dropping and then progress could be made.
Thank you. And I will say from the facilitator, I facilitated in both of these locations, not all of the locations, but these two happen to be my locations. I saw the same thing. And I, as a facilitator, piece of feedback for everybody is I had to really think about my phrasing. As Progress Center, we really got used to training the basic materials, just training and disseminating information. And so when I went into this audience, they were all experienced educators. I didn't need to teach them what a good, high quality, present level of performance was. They knew that. I had to teach them how to help others learn what that is, how to take those resources. And that was a change for me as a facilitator. I do professional development all the time. And I'm saying that to you and your implementation, and to think about, if you wanted to implement this, be thinking about your audience and how you have to phrase things to them so that you don't inadvertently drive walls up where they're like, I already know all this, why am I learning this? And so I love that you made that point, Shara, because I saw that not only in New York, but I saw it in East Baton Rouge and in our other sites where there were other facilitators. They experienced very similar things, and it was a good mind shift to think about when we're training experienced staff, what does that look like and how do we help them recognize where they can utilize these resources, but also sometimes sharpen their skills. So thanks for sharing that. Pam, this kind of ties to what we were talking about a little bit, but as a facilitator of the Coaching Institute, I witnessed many moments when participants shifted their thinking about supporting special education staff. Which activities from your experience, because you participated in this as well, did you feel had the greatest impact on changing practices? Like what, as I left and I went home and you're there in your school district and you heard your coaches talking about the resources and tools that they learned in the Coaching Institute, what did you feel like had the most impact?
Oh man, Sarah, many of the activities, in fact, all of the activities were wonderful. One of the first activities that that stand out to me is the feedback, writing the script to provide feedback. Of course, when we initially think of feedback, it appears to be something very simple to do. We're just conveying to an individual, our thoughts and ideas and just giving them advice and suggestion. But when you really truly look at the process and the steps of providing high quality feedback, it pretty much changes your perspective. So that activity was very, very engaging with our instructional support specialist staff. It's even just watching them go through the process of writing feedback, because often individuals don't think about writing feedback, like let's script this out. And when you really go through the process of actually scripting out feedback, it actually kind of helps you to think about that feedback at another level. So just watching the interaction and the engagement and the role playing of providing the feedback and the responses that were received, and just the aha moments, those aha moments, and just the way individuals begin to think differently about feedback, and think about feedback at another level, and even not just when you're coaching, but in many different areas, being able to kind of just sit down and actually follow through with the process of providing feedback and thinking that feedback through so that it can truly be effective. Because if you're providing feedback, you want that feedback to be effective.
Mhm. And feedback can easily turn someone to away from the information you're trying to help share with them, if not presented correctly. So I appreciate you sharing that. I will say that both of these institutes that with my panelists were done in separation. So we recommend the 3 days. In East Baton Rouge, we did 2 days, and then we came back about 6 weeks later and did a final day. And we gave them an opportunity to do a coaching cycle in between. In New York City, we did a very similar. We started with 1 day, and then we came back roughly about 6 weeks later. I think similar about 6 weeks later, and did the second day. And what that allowed the coaches to do is kind of take in some of the information, think about how to apply it, maybe practice a little bit, and then come back with some different thoughts around how they might interact. Even if they didn't actually do a coaching cycle, they may have thought about how are they talking to their staff differently through the feedback process. How are they modeling things, and what impact does that have on them? And I share that because our first institute in Guam was 3 days of all 3 days together. And although it was very impactful, we didn't have that opportunity to come back. And so we're actually going back and doing a follow-up here in a few weeks, because they haven't had a chance to kind of debrief their process of coaching cycles and what that looked like. And so one recommendation from my learning of this is that if you can split your days over time and allowing for digestible information and allowing them to kind of practice in between with some homework, with some accountability to come back and be able to provide that feedback, it really heightens their ability to implement the coaching skills and strategies that we were teaching in the Institute. So thanks for sharing that, Pam. And I want to ask Melissa, as you reflect on your experience of the Coaching Institute and our planning and our learning from it, if you were to plan and implement a Coaching Institute again, what things would you keep? What elements of it would you keep? And what elements do you feel were missing or needed to be changed to have a more successful institute?
Thank you. So I think we would keep it face to face. It allowed for a lot of really rich interaction among the participants. And we did plan together with Progress Center, and that was really helpful to have our local team planning together with Progress Center for Progress Center to, have flexibility with the way materials were presented so that we could make connections with the way our local IP form looks, the way the regulations are in New York State and New York City. And I think we could have done even more of that to help connect the dots for folks and navigate the materials from the Progress Center, which are really helpful at unpacking what the federal regulations and expectations are from that nationwide lens. And I think we could have done even more of that co-planning and co-presenting to really help make these materials relevant and usable in our local context. And something that was challenging for us is because of the size of our system and the audience that we chose. Because we chose to work with individuals who are supporting schools and who are not working directly with students, they were then, it was a train the trainer model. So they were then taking those materials and using them for training and coaching and consulting with schools. So our information about how that process went and how useful the schools found the materials, the IP teams and the teachers and all that, we had anecdotally, but it was a little harder for us to quantify how useful and what the changes in practice were like in the turnkey model and the train the trainer model that we had set up for this. So that's something we would give some consideration of if we were to repeat this or, planning in the future because of the way and the audience that we decided to implement this with. I see there's a question in the chat about New York and LA. Are coaches required to be licensed? And I can speak for New York City and say that there's not a specific coaching license per se. We do have coaches who are teachers assigned. So they're similar to a teacher contract, but they don't necessarily teach students directly. There are coaches in the system, within schools who teach and coach. At our district and central level, we have coaches who are licensed to be teachers. We have coaches who are licensed to be principals, but there's not a specific coaching license. It's based on the job descriptions and the roles of the team that they're part of.
And Sarah, if I can answer that for Louisiana, our State Department does offer an add-on to the teaching certification called instructional coaching. And in fact, in 2011, when that was initially introduced, I was actually a part of that first cohort that was kind of established to go through a series of classes to work towards that certification. So individuals providing coaching within our state and our district do not have to have that instructional coaching certification. Because if we think about coaching, anyone who is trained to coach can provide coaching. So, of course, and it depends upon the job title. If someone was in a position that was designated as an instructional coach position, that may be required as far as the teaching certification, but it's not required to follow through with the process of coaching in general.
Thank you. I'm glad you guys saw that in the chat because I think that's a great question and something that we didn't run into. All 5 of our sites do not have any requirements on coaching specifically in their state. And if you do, that is something that you would have to think about when you're selecting your audience for your coaching institute. But I also think that our goal with the Coaching Institute wasn't necessarily to focus on people certified to coach, although that would be great. I think that would be really helpful because they likely have some education that's behind them on high quality coaching. But the idea was we're really just trying to build capacity of people that have some experience with IDEA and help them recognize resources and tools and information and think about how can they turn that to staff that doesn't have that same knowledge, that doesn't have the same experience, that might be struggling. And one thing I want to share, something that we learned in Louisiana through some follow-up is that in East Baton Rouge that several coaches came back and they had selected a staff member that was like their one staff member that they were having to support all the time. And they were doing coaching cycles with them and they were really struggling and very frustrated with that process of coaching that struggling staff member and not being able to refine their own skills. And so something Progress Center learned, and we coached the coaches to think about finding someone that had some skill deficits, but that could learn and grow so that they as coaches could build their skills. And once their skills were more solidified, they then could turn back to that teacher who needed a lot of extra support. Because remember, coaches, these people that we are working with to become coaches are learning how to coach. Sometimes that's not something they have background. They don't have certification. They don't have extra training in this area of coaching, and it may be a new concept to them. And they need an opportunity to build those skills and have success in coaching before they select the most difficult, I shouldn't say difficult, I should say the staff member that needs the most support. And so that's something that I learned to say to the audience is thinking about who are you selecting when you're first learning to coach, and how can you pick a person that you can work on your own skill set with. Well, it is time for us to jump off. I want to thank my panel of local educators. I saw in the chat several people thanked us for having different places, having local context around the idea of a coaching institute. I'm going to have Riley share our email box at Progress Center at AIR.org in the chat, our email, not our email box, excuse me. And if you have interest in implementing a coaching institute and you want to reach out to Progress Center and see how we could support you, we have scope and sequence that we've used. We have agendas that we've used. We can help you think about how to lay these materials and resources out if that would be helpful to you. So we encourage you, if you have further questions for New York City or East Baton Rouge, please reach out through that same email and we'll get you in contact with them if they can help you in any way, learn from their experiences. Thank you for being here today. We are ending our 2-day presentation with a wonderful discussion with the East Baton Rouge School District on an impact story. So come back in at the top of the hour and join us and learn about some of the impact that they've had in their local district. Have a great afternoon and see you guys in about 15 minutes.